All right. Well, thank you. We've had a great week at IDEA in our your annual lunch webinar series. We've had over 300 people register over the past 3 days. And I think that it is appropriate that we're ending with the best panel of the three, in my opinion. My name's Jeff Ifrah. I'm the founding partner of Ifrah Law, and I'm also a co-founder along with Jeremy Kleiman of IDEA, which we started almost 10 years ago as online gaming first became legal in Delaware, New Jersey, and Nevada. And now we have 5 more states since that time. And we continue to advocate on a daily basis for more states to join and regulate legal online gaming and bring consumer more protection as they play online. So today's session is session number 3. We're speaking to 3 CEOs and asking them to please chart the future of nationwide iGaming Vision 2030. So what can we expect to see over the next 5 years? Why has iGaming moved a little more slowly than we'd like, and certainly seems to have moved a lot more slowly than online sports betting? And what can we expect in the future? And we've assembled quite a cast here, and we're really proud at IDEA of all of our 30 plus members who are leading operators, suppliers, affiliates, and payment suppliers in the space. And I know today's webinar won't let anyone down. If you have questions for any of our panelists, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A session, and you just simply have to type in the question, and we can field that question during the panel, or there's 10 minutes reserved at the end of the panel for the Q&As that have been collected. The chat box is disabled, so only use the Q&A box, which, again, we will try to field those questions as soon as we can. Don't feel like you need to wait to the end to type them in. Our first panelist is Anna Sainsbury, who is the CEO of GeoComply, which is a leading provider of geolocation compliance technology that enables regulated online gaming and sports betting operators to ensure that their services are only accessible within approved jurisdictions. And having launched the leading geolocation service, GeoComply also provides a series of new technologies, which hopefully Anna will have a chance to speak about in the fraud detection and other consumer protection areas. Next, we have Matt Olin, who is the CEO of San Carlos Apache Gaming Enterprise. Very unique opportunity to speak to a CEO of 2 land-based casinos in the tribal area, who is also a partner in online sports betting, most recently with Win Interactive and Win Interactive in Arizona, and now has been granted a new license to move forward with a new operator. They operate Apache Gold and Apache Sky casinos on behalf of the San Carlos Apache tribe in Arizona. They offer traditional gaming and mobile sports betting services. And I think Matt's going to have a very unique perspective to share with us about tribal views on online gaming. Finally, Michael Tobin, CEO of Continent 8, which, as you know, is a global leader in managed hosting, connectivity, cloud, and cybersecurity solutions, serving the iGaming industry across multiple continents. All 3 of these CEOs have been involved in online or retail gaming since literally the beginning. We're very, very lucky and privileged to have as members Continent 8 since our founding, and GeoComply literally upon its licensing, and we super appreciate the support of these members and all our members. Let's begin with our panel discussion, and we're going to look at some statistics that on the American gaming industry and consumer trends that we anticipate that a legalized iGaming industry would have across multiple jurisdictions. Anna, if you could share some of the data that you prepared on American gambling habits and the conversation from illegal to legal markets. GeoComply has a tremendous amount of data at its fingertips. I know that when I visited the Pennsylvania regulator, there's a huge TV screen showing pinpointed where every customer in Pennsylvania is placing bets, and that's brought to them by GeoComply. And you obviously have a large amount of other data at your beck and call, which can be very helpful to analyze the question of what does the illegal market look like in the United States, and what other takeaways can you provide about iGaming's future in the US?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I obviously have enjoyed working with all of you over the past many years that we've been in the online gaming and sports betting area. So I think one thing for us before we start making visions of the future, it's important to recognize how far we've come. First of all, let's be clear that legal online sports betting is still only available to 50% of Americans. And many Americans, of course, have been playing online sports as well as online casino and poker for many, many years before we started seeing these legal operators popping up in each state. So this should give you an idea of how popular the illegal or offshore operators still are when we have 85 million US visitors going on to the Borvada website or visiting the Borvada website within a 3-month period. So there's clearly an appetite that many people have that are both in legal and illegal states now, where they're still going to these offshore entities, which they have relationships with. Let's go. This isn't just one or two brands. There are over 50 major illegal gambling brands still today, and hundreds of other small sites that are still advertising. If we can go to the next slide, please. They are attracting many, many players, similarly to the legal operators that we know are spending lots of money paying tax, hiring Americans, going through the licensing, making sure that they are those credible entities in the industry that we are all building together. But when you look at two sites from the registration page, they look so similar. However, I think one of the challenges we still know today is that around 60 to 70 people that are going on to the highly regulated sites are only passing the device authentication checks, the KYC requirements that we have to ensure there's no money laundering, the requirements around payments and proper processing of those payments. These are all challenges and integrity and compliance requirements that you would expect in a regulated market, where the illegal guys are not having those same requirements. And so often you could have a highly regulated state that permits both iGaming and casino, but users are being bounced off of those sites because of the integrity requirements and how cumbersome it can be to find a bank that's going to process the transaction. And therefore, they're still going to these illegal or offshore books and online casinos. So that's an important point for us all to consider, that of course we want more bills to come. We want more states. We want online casino as well as sports betting in many states. That's what a lot of the industry is obviously wanting us to talk about today. But the amount of availability and advertising for the illegal operators is still quite tremendous. So you still can Google, or, even if you put in sports betting in Google while you're in the US, even in a legal state, a lot of the advertising that you're going to see and a lot of the search results from Google is going to be the illegal or offshore books. We're also still seeing a tremendous amount of ads. And even in coverage like the Super Bowl this year, a lot of the bet types that are being quoted by major news broadcasters and even print media is on the illegal operators. So there's still a lot of education that needs to take place between who are those licensed tax-paying entities that we've been building up in the industry, and how can we get more traffic to them and make sure that those that aren't participating in this legal market we've been building are not being able to attract and retain US bets. So this is the impact of our success. We're still seeing 400 billion wagered annually by Americans with illegal and offshore sites. And so even if we didn't see any new bills, there's still a tremendous amount of brand building that we can do within existing states and offering products that that Americans do want to experience that they're currently seeking to experience with offshore sites so that they have that accessibility. That's 44 billion in lost gaming revenue and about 13 billion in lost tax revenue. So this is a big enough area for us to also concentrate on and for us to think about as an industry as we move forward.
Well, that's a scary but nice way to tee this up, Anna. And I wanted to ask Michael and then Matt, how does what Anna has just presented sort of align with your thoughts on um, the issues facing iGaming legislation in new states?
You want, I can go first, Jeff. I think Anna, thanks
Thanks,
for the
Michael.
staff numbers put into clear view what the issue is. It all comes down to money and tax dollars, and as you said, jobs that are created in reputable companies. It's very difficult to control. If it's on the internet, it must be real, and the average consumer clicks on it and may not know they're going someplace where they're either defrauded or, if not defrauded, at least operating and assisting a company that's preying on American consumers. I think every company has a responsibility to bloom where you're planted, and the American tax dollars that are not being captured, I think, is an important part of this, even beyond the ability to control the responsible gaming practices and oversight by licensing bodies. So I think advertising has always been, the key factor that people have said stop this. And you put the search engines or the large tech players who just allow people to be freely having commerce available at the infrastructure level, and we really, unlike Anna's, unlike GeoComply, who really deep into the data, we're the plumbers. We put the pipes in the places in and host people, and can easily stop anybody or regulators if we don't want to license them any further. Significant background checks and people customers that we can shut them off from the physical point of view, but they can pop up someplace else, perhaps in an AWS cloud someplace where AWS doesn't even know that they're operating. But I think advertising is probably going to be the key thing to stop this more than anything else. Prosecutions have been tried before, but I think you really got to get to the consumer to make them aware that hey, you're compromising your own domestic economy by supporting offshore sites. So it's a very difficult thing to monitor. It's easy to monitor, but it's hard to regulate, and I think you have to affect the consumer's behavior more than anything. The regulators are completely unable, other than saying to someone like ourselves, so we found a site that isn't, what do you do about it? Can you help us run down where they are and that sort of thing? But it's very difficult for someone who's capable of communicating to consumers.
Thank you, Michael. And of course, Anna's pointing out how many hundreds of these companies there are. So even when we see a regulator like Michigan issue a cease and desist letter to a Bovada, that's not going to do the trick unless they also issue cease and desist letters to this sort of whack-a-mole illegal offshore industry. So Matt, I want to ask you to sort of react to that, and then we have a question from a listener that I think is right up your alley, Matt.
Right. Okay. Well, I think to start, I think, Michael really hit the nail on the head on a lot of the issues. There's no question with all of these different sites that offer this type of illegal gaming, consumer protection, of course, number one issue. And as we know, it doesn't just involve not only those who are involved, relative to whether or not their information is protected, but cybersecurity issues. Obviously, there's funding of these sites, so we're talking about bank secrecy issues and all those other matters. In addition to that, and I think it was mentioned, is that beyond just problem gaming, consumer protection, and banking, cybersecurity issues, all of the states involved in whether it's online mobile sports gaming or iGaming in those states that allow it, there's certain factors that are related to that, whether it's tribal or commercial state gaming. As mentioned before, there's tax revenues involved. There's employment issues involved. So I think it's critically important that that all the measures that are being discussed related to illegal gaming continue and much more. And at the same time, that those that are now entering the market, as we have, and with iGaming has had in a number of states, that those consumers can be assured that they're in a fair game, that there's consumer protections, and that the funding of those wagers are being properly managed and protected, and the payment as well. So that's critical. In addition, of course, there's revenues related to that affect nationally. They also affect the states. Certainly in Arizona, there's a revenue share with the state of Arizona. A number of those funds go to many, many important things, including local communities and all those types of things. When it comes to tribal gaming, also critically important. For tribes, gaming has been a critical economic driver. The tribe's ability to have that exclusivity in some states is vital to those tribes and to their economic health. And of course, these things cannibalize all of that. So there's a lot of risks with the illegal gaming component of this, and a lot of damage being done. And when it's done properly, the way it's being done in a number of states, and certainly Arizona is a good one, you can ensure that you have compliance, you have regulatory, you've got problem gaming issues being addressed. That's we'll get into it a little bit later, but we're talking about really a whole new demographic in the mobile event sports, as well as iGaming, a much younger demographic. And while that's a great expansion of the gaming industry generally, it also carries the risk of problem gaming and the impacts of that. And so when you have these illegal sites, I think they're anything but concerned about how to mitigate problem gaming. So
you've all highlighted the importance of consumer protection and conversely the lack of consumer protection when you have a proliferation of illegal sites. And you would think that in a country that is constantly talking about legislating to protect consumers, whether that's a responsible gambling perspective to head off addiction before it starts, or at least intervene when signs of addiction are being displayed. Payment processing, you both mentioned, because we know that offshore customers are often defrauded. They can deposit the money, but then they can't get their winnings off. Bank Secrecy Act issues and money laundering that both Anna and Matt mentioned. So these all seem like great motivators, if I were a legislator, to pass online gaming, because it would bring protections to hopefully do better in all those areas by imposing regulation. But that hasn't happened. And the one reason that we hear from legislators is what Matt was just discussing, which is cannibalization. And I want to ask everyone, but start with Matt. But I want Anna and Michael to also think about, Matt, you've launched online sports betting and you have retail gaming in 2 casinos. How have you felt about the issue of cannibalization? Was that a concern when you entered the mobile market? And now that you've seen a few years of revenues in both those markets, how would you respond to the allegation that online gaming essentially cannibalizes land-based revenue?
Great, and that's a great point and a great question. And Of course, initially, whenever you enter into a new field, a new endeavor, move into the next sort of the future of the next phase of gaming, that's a concern. It's a risk. Although for me, it was fairly minimal because most of the information that was at hand and most of the information we know now is that, and in our case, as an example, not only did in Arizona, it's referred to as mobile event wagering. It is essentially online sports betting right now. Arizona has not taken up iGaming at this point, although I would not be surprised if that's coming very soon. The interesting thing about online sports betting as an example versus, say, traditional brick and mortar, and why they don't necessarily seem to have a negative impact on one another, is they're an entirely different demographic. And so, for example, iGaming is an example. The primary demographic in iGaming is actually 18 to 24, but if we expand that and go to 18 to 34 as an example, 70% of all iGaming is 18 to 34. And in traditional brick and mortar gaming, the typical demographic is age 50 plus. The other interesting thing is in sports betting, as an example, the largest demographic by far in sports betting is men. In sports betting itself, 95% men. Now in iGaming, that number changes a little bit, and in iGaming, it's about 55% men, 45% female. And that flips exactly opposite in the traditional, call it brick and mortar gaming market, where it is almost exactly opposite. It's about 51% women, 49% men. So the idea that that there's somehow they conflict or is really a misnomer. In fact, quite the opposite. It's really the expansion of the gaming industry to an entirely new demographic, and it makes it available to people who to really the next gen, as it were. And when done properly, they complement one another, and it's a really good opportunity for those in the gaming industry to be able to get out to an entirely new demographic, and an opportunity really to expand their market, not only, of course, in the iGaming arena or in the sports betting arena, but into their traditional brick and mortar, and it brings change to those as well. So we start looking at our traditional casinos and what we have to offer, and start looking at how we can expand that to that much younger market. That in mind, again, still requires that component of consumer protection and problem gaming. So that's always a concern of ours. And we want to be sure that it's made available, but people are protected, and people who have problem gaming issues, that there's resources available to them. So, and for tribes as well, that's been exponential.
Thank you, Matt. And I saw
Yeah.
you nodding along there.
Yeah, I
What can
mean,
you add to that?
there's so much to say. I mean, one thing is being fearful of cannibalization, I don't think is the right way to handle innovation. The fact that there are more potential consumers that you can engage with is great for a brand. I really understand what Matt's saying when it comes to like an omni-channel presence and how to tie in your online offering with an experience of bringing someone to an immersive property where they can feel your brand can be a really empowering and amazing thing for any brand to have, right? Many of us as young people, especially our children, engage with Disney through the movies, and then they go to Disneyland and feel it, and it's a holiday that every kid begs their parents for. And I think that Vegas has done that for adults, right? They've created an adult playground, which has got many different experiences for people. And so I think those that are going to do it well will do it very well. But I think that sometimes people believe that doing nothing means that that competition is not there. And so by not legalizing sports betting or online casino, there's an assumption that you are protecting people that are living within your state.
It's a great point. It's a
Yeah.
great point in.
It's just not true. People are experiencing these games, if you regulate them or not, or even if you do regulate online casino games, but you limit the games and you're not re-regulating or re-evaluating what you've permitted, and therefore you're still not embracing the new types of games that Americans want to interact with, you're still essentially pushing people to the illegal market. And I think that that's a fine line. You want to make sure that there are the controls there, that you know who's on these sites, that they, are paying tax, that these sites are good, that they are paying out, that they're banking with legitimate financial institutions, and that there are controls and ways to encourage people to interact with these brands safely, which I think any large brand that would want to participate in an omni-channel presence would want to do a great job, because these are companies that want to thrive. So I think those are all important things to consider. But the biggest one, I think, is that the illegal market is our biggest competitor. It's not the person that has also got a license in each state that is placing an ad next to yours or a sign-up bonus that's equal or more than yours. I think that it really is the illegal market, and we need to focus on that.
And Michael, like Anna, you service the entire industry in the United States. What's your view across the landscape? What do you hear from your partners regarding the barriers to legalization for iGaming?
Well, I feel like I'm a father confessor with a lot of these customers here in the US in particular, but what Anna said is bang on. I don't think any level of regulation and enforcement of regulation by government authorities is going to really combat this. There is the only thing that can, but what I see right now, we've had a lot of sports betting customers obviously licensed in the US, big rush by entrepreneurs, as well as obviously the big brands who are capable of dominating the market. All of these people are our customers. iGaming, I think, is essential to the lifeblood of protecting the consumer, because it allows some of these entrepreneurial companies who come in legitimately, spend time, dollars, efforts to get licensed in the States and just can't compete because sports betting is not enough for them to be profitable. Sports betting was accepted in the US by a lot of politicians because I think Jeff was through a discussion with you or a session with me put on where initially there's an opinion poll that sports betting wasn't gambling in the US. In a society where I grew up, there was the line on your local newspaper every day. So no, it's not gambling. So when you allow sports betting to happen, and Matt, you know better than myself, I'm not a gaming person. I've never been bet in my life. Where the margins are a lot bigger with sports betting. If you allow profitability through things like iGaming to come to entrepreneurs who want to do the right thing in the marketplace and want to compete, and a lot of them now are saying, yes, we need to pull out of the States. We want to focus on other areas of the world that you're in. And so a lot of them are shifting their resources, and we're spending a lot of time now in Asia, Latin America, and with the same, even Middle East, Africa. There's a whole shift until iGaming really does come of age in the US. And what fills that gap? Of the entrepreneurs that come and try to compete with the big brands are the offshore players that, hey, there's a sucker born every minute. Let me call that American who'll be betting on FanDuel or DraftKings or BetMGM, but want something maybe different. And they get sucked in by somebody that truly is not fully in the American economic scene because they're not paying taxes. I think the market really has to be self-regulating in a lot of areas, along with the legislative environment. But there's no way that a law alone and trying to prosecute some of these players who you don't even know where they are is going to stop the consumer from sampling this thing. There's not more choices for them.
Yeah, and one of the things that the IDEA members are all doing is spending time and money advertising and ideas contributing ad campaigns to advertise to consumers to let them know that not every site is legal and you're not protected on every site. And we all receive emails from frustrated consumers who have lost money. And when I ask them what site they're on, inevitably it's a site I've never heard of because it's an offshore site. And I feel bad. I feel for them because when you speak to them, they don't know. They're not reading the terms. They're not checking, DGE's website to see if the operator's licensed. They honestly don't know. And we had a question here right now, very, very great point, which I'm sure you'll agree with. When a customer goes to an online sports betting site, so Yana put up statistics showing online sports betting data and how many U.S. consumers are touched by advertising from illegal offshore sites. When a customer goes onto those sites, are they also introduced to mobile casino and mobile gaming? And do they therefore get to then toggle over and do more than just online sports betting, but also play, offshore casino games, offshore slot games? Well, of course that happens. So, operators like Matt are not just losing a customer on the sports betting side, they're also losing a potential customer on the retail gaming side in Arizona or the future of iGaming if it comes to Arizona. So it's a great question. And the we also have a question for Mike on the issue you just raised. Mike, someone is asking about the entrepreneurs that you're talking about. He says he's one of the ones you're talking about. And he wants to talk about sweepstakes and their comparison to regulated iGaming. And I'm not sure, there was a little bit of a discussion on that yesterday. Dave Rebuck had some words about that. I'm not sure, Matt, that's something that you're familiar with, but maybe Anna and Michael have something to say about that.
Sure, I can chime in. I was alluding to this a little bit in my comments about just because we have a bill and we pass online casino and iGaming, there is still considerations around the limitations of your initial technical standards document and bill that approves certain types of gaming. The reality is, I still see it today. Many regulators put out their technical standards and allow operators to go live, and then they just let it sit. And they're not embracing new types of games or permitting operators to offer more and more bet types. And therefore, they're handcuffed a little bit in terms of their ability to innovate and compete with these illegal offshore guys. So if there is no good reason and these games can be safe, I do think that regulators have a big opportunity and to get back on why can't these games be offered? If they can be offered fair and secure and they can be auditable and we can make sure that the geolocation, the KYC requirements and all the AML requirements are complied with, then what are we saying no to? And I think that that's going to be important. I know that a lot of states have staffing limitations and therefore their ability to update technical standards or their regulations can be limited. But this is an evolving and changing entertainment industry that we're in. And we are responsible to entertain. And if we can't do it as a legal market, then someone offshore that's not paying tax and doesn't have any hoops to jump through is surely going to service that market. And I know what we're seeing right now is a tremendous amount of innovation and Americans that are loving some of these new products, and regulators aren't coming out with an opinion on if it's permitted or if it's not. And therefore, I know a lot of operators that want to make sure that they're doing the right thing and then they're not violating their licenses, aren't participating in these new game types because they don't know where regulators stand. And I think that that leaves us in a bit of a pickle, which we're seeing today, and people are frustrated, both consumers and I would say many licensed operators that I know.
Yeah, I mean, over 12 years ago, Michael, DFS started, and I remember MGM and Caesars, they wouldn't touch it because they did not want to lose their valuable license. licenses that Matt can tell you take a long time for a casino to get and have a lot of oversight requirements. This seems sort of like the same thing, maybe.
It all goes back to what Anna said, entertainment. Years ago when all of this started, and we initially we never touched sports betting because sports betting was something that, the common understanding then was you set up a sports betting site, perhaps if you're truly illegal, to wash money. With the buyer and with the seller, with the customer and with the operator of the sites. We just really stayed away from it. So everybody knew, as I said earlier, that sports betting in the States in particular is not even a common practice in all the European countries, and so that's evolved. I think what Anna was mentioning about regulators and technical standards, we've developed, because we've seen the need for it, because we get to know the regulators very, very well. We've set up a compliance team that gathers, it's led by Jeremy Camper, deep experience in compliance and operations in an online gaming environment. Our security business has just been exploding simply because we talked about lost tax records. We talked about consumers with fraud in the world of cyber warfare, stealing private data, whether it's sweepstakes, whether it's illegal sites. That is probably more of a concern. And some of the standards that are out there are just so complex. I don't think there's ever going to be one actual standard that everybody has to comply to. With best practices that need to be spread, work with various suppliers, different regulators, so that the consumer can be protected as much by players like ourselves and the regulators, and making them more aware just in general of cybersecurity practices. There's a lot of these bad actors that are out there that I think have deeper reasons for being in our space, in the gaming space, than just avoiding taxes or operating illegally and scamming people. And sweepstakes is one of those areas that if there's not a sort of a control mechanism through regulation put in place at some point, that could be pretty devastating to a lot of people.
And I think to your point, and Jeff, as it relates to certainly our experience in a state where sports betting is legal, as it relates to any kind of sweepstakes offering, bonusing offering, there are some allowances for certain types of bonusing and sweepstakes that are quite heavily regulated as well. So anybody who might be involved in any kind of a bonus offering or anything like that may be offered in the state, there's there's regulations that apply to ensure that any of these types of promotional activities or offers are consistent and fair, and that there are certain standards of compliance that would certainly have to apply, and really they're really kind of taken from a perspective of promoting a site, and ideas to kind of help get creative with those gamers who are involved in it, and would be subject to any of the other regulations. There's also limitations as to what percentages of sports betting revenue and things of that nature can be applied to those types of things. So it would be the same whether it's any type of promotional activity, bonusing activity, some type of sweepstake that would apply, would certainly would apply under the same sets of regulations. Again, to protect the sanctity of the gaming activity and protect the gamer, to ensure that there's fairness and equity, and all of those rules, of course, and regulations are in place, would have had to have been in place before anybody went live in any form of legal gaming, certainly in the state of Arizona.
Matt, on the issue of tribal, there's so much talk over the past 2 years about California, and everyone would be very excited if California decided to pass online gaming legislation. Of course, it's such a tremendous market. One of the largest economies in the world, top 10, 25% of our spend. I'm sure that a lot of the data that Anna has shows that a super large spend is from California. Not surprising. California is different than, I would say, than Texas, but when you look at the California market, there's so many tribes, and they seem to also be concerned not just about cannibalization, but also about job losses. And there's also some talk that if gaming was to pass there, it really should be exclusive to the tribes and maybe just offered on site. Is there, what would you say if you were talking to California tribes about your experience and why perhaps cannibalization shouldn't really be top of mind or job loss shouldn't be top of mind?
Right, right. I think you make some very good points. And now I think the bigger concern for California tribes certainly, and same is true in Arizona, is in Arizona as an example. Similarly in California, although California does have some types of gaming outside the traditional Class 3 tribal gaming, but essentially in California, it's very similar to the extent that tribes have exclusivity under their compact. So I would say the biggest concern for California and for tribes in California in particular is that exclusivity component under the state compact. In terms of concerns of cannibalization, as we talked about before, I think what this is, and I think Anna put it very well, the reality of it is that cannibalization unfortunately already exists in the form of the illegal online gaming. So I don't think that expanding gaming and making it legal in the form of iGaming or even sports betting is necessarily going to cannibalize the traditional casinos that exist there or for those tribes. I think the bigger concern and the thing that, of course, that would have to be addressed in California, as it is being addressed and has been addressed in the state of Arizona, is the exclusivity component of sovereign tribal gaming. And that component relating to the state compact. There certainly are many, many important measures in those compacts, not only as they affect tribes, but as they affect states. And as we know, many states are dealing with budget shortfalls these days, and the appeal or the attraction to expand gaming or certainly to get into the iGaming market in any state is there. I can understand that. It has to be there. And that component as it relates to tribes in particular and those state compacts is really, really critical because there's already substantial revenue share with all the tribes in each of these states, California, Arizona, and many others, that benefit the state and should continue. However, in many states, I'll use Arizona as an example, if there were any kind of a expansion of any type of Class 3 gaming, and in this case, that would be iGaming or sports betting, that was outside the scope of the state compact. In Arizona, they refer to that as a poison pill, and that would affect all the tribes in the state, certainly, but it would also potentially impact the state and the state's revenues. So I guess my feeling to California is I do not see that iGaming or sports betting is detrimental to the tribes, as long as the tribes are unified in that exclusivity component. Because once it gets outside that, one of the things that's happened a little bit in Arizona as under the compact is Arizona has 20 licenses available under the compact and under the legislation that was passed, of which 10 are available to tribes and 10 are available to commercial, we'll call it the leagues. And that's been detrimental, unfortunately, to the tribes to the extent that almost 90% of the sports betting revenue that's been generated has gone to the 10 non-tribal operators. And that's something that if iGaming were to come to Arizona, if it would go to California, from a tribal gaming perspective, is something that's critically important. That exclusivity component, keeping it consistent with the state compacts, I think is really going to be critical. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. In fact, the opposite. I think same thing with Arizona. I think it's critically important for the tribes to work together, to be unified, and stay ahead of it. My feeling is iGaming's coming at some point. It's too important to so many states, and it's important for tribes to be unified, working together to ensure that they protect that exclusivity. But I think it would be extraordinarily beneficial to California tribes if they were able to get legislation through under those circumstances.
One of the things that's a little bit of a barrier to passing online gaming legislation is that in many states it requires the voters to actually go and vote on passing amendments to their state constitutions to permit online gaming legislation. Does anyone have any thoughts on how significant, a barrier that is to the future of online gaming?
I'd be happy to jump in a little bit for Arizona. An interesting thing about Arizona, as an example, is the voters have since the legislation was passed in 2003 that allowed tribal gaming under the compact, and that did require a vote. That did amend the state constitution, and that, as a result, the voters have been very supportive of that. They still are today. In fact, most polls show that the voters of Arizona still believe very strongly that tribal gaming is critically important to the tribe's economic development, and that sovereignty should remain. So there is that component of it, that in many states, the voters appear to be very much in favor of that. Where the voters seem to get concerned in the polls that we see is if it goes beyond that, if it goes into the commercial arena, if it goes outside the scope of the compacts, and that becomes a lot trickier. Of course, anytime you're involved in any kind of a state constitutional amendment, I was in Colorado years ago when the state constitution was amended to allow limited stakes gaming. It's challenging. And there's concerns. Certainly, there are many concerns that voters have, not the least of which is many voters really aren't fully informed as to what we've been talking about earlier, to the extent that the market already exists in the illegal arena. And so that, if voters fully understood that by making it legal, it generates tax revenue, it generates jobs, it generates benefits to the community, I think it would be much more welcome. And just in my experience, again, in Arizona, I think the voters also like the fact that it benefits rural tribes, in many cases, rural communities. So I think if it comes to the point where it would require legislation in some states, it would be challenging. I think it's important to get, fully get the accurate and true information about the impacts of it. In Arizona, in this case, of course, that's already happened. So it could happen through legislation through the state senate and the governor's office. But in many states, of course, you're right, it would require a constitutional amendment.
Anna and Michael, if
Yeah.
iGaming is passed, do you feel like there's a sufficient infrastructure in place now to deal with the added complexities of responsible gaming and gaming addiction concerns, responsible advertising? Is that going to need to change, like be improved, be significantly enhanced? Or do you think that what's in place now in sports betting side, will serve as a sufficient model for online gaming?
Jeff, I go back to what I said earlier. I think if you allow profitability, and iGaming will be a component of bringing more profitable operations into licensed entities, and allow not just big guys to be involved. Licensed companies will want to ensure that there's protections in place that affects their brand, it affects the industry. So I think it's a huge motivator from within. Government can't regulate everything, and particularly human behavior. So, Matt's comments on constitutional amendments, I think politicians in general are going to be faced with decisions, not just with iGambling, but iGaming, the esports world, the effect that has had on social behavior. Like, how do you regulate people being in front of a screen all day? So there's a lot, government can't control all of this. So the industries that have to be profitable, that have to be encouraged to take some of these principles and participate with, elected representatives of the people. It's a societal problem that goes well beyond sports betting, iGambling, and I think it needs to be recognized that it's not going to go away. And,
Yeah.
so it needs to be funded in multiple ways. It's an omni-channel project for sure. And with omni-marketing.
I think, you know, from my perspective, I've actually testified at 2 or 3 California hearings over the years. And one thing that I think is, you know, important for regulators and for all of us to remember, that regulators are responsible to protect businesses, but also to protect taxpayers. And I think in the conversation of what we see in California is that a lot of the conversation is about Americans being highly educated on the nuances of our industry. And I think that that's kind of hard for us to expect them to be voting on each bill and having an opinion when, from their perspective, they're engaging with these brands that they don't know are illegal, right? We have all the data points on the fact that they don't know that. And so expecting them to vote on these bills, I think it's not really right. We know that they're voting with how they're spending their dollars because I've shown you those data points. And we also know that California is the big tech innovation state. It is one of the reasons that it has this amazing economy. And those big tech companies are the ones that are showing these illegal operators. They're the ones taking those ad dollars. I've heard stats up to 20 million a month in ad spend from Bravada alone in the California market on Google. And so, you know, those are big numbers we're talking about. So the economy is already being impacted in that space. The next kind of item that I see on responsible gaming is at any state hearing I've participated in, I've been asked to talk about, can you ensure Americans are only placing bets within this state? Can you ensure that they are of age? And are there checks and balances and technologies available to make sure that safer gaming can be supported? And the answer to all of those things is that it's true. But when I see a technical standard get released in any state, it never includes responsible gaming standards. And I think what we need as an industry, and any licensed operator just wants to have a level playing field of what does good look like in terms of responsible gaming, and can we agree as an industry on a standard that is enforced just like random number generator testing by the test that we all trust and have adopted for all other types of compliance requirements that the industry has embraced for responsible gaming. The technology exists, but someone needs to implement what the standard is and apply it across land-based and online operators equally in each state, which is something that we are equipped to do, but we just need action from the regulators and compliance standards.
Well, those are all amazingly concise points that we will continue to work with. And Anna, I'm going to start with you because we're coming to the end somehow. I feel like I could listen to all of you all day, but the title of our webinar was Looking Ahead to 2030. What's your bold prediction for iGaming landscape in the US 2030? What states do you think that we might see live in 5 years? No one's going to remember, so it's kind of a safe bet just to say whatever you want.
5 years
I'm
is
gonna
it's a long
I'm going to
time
ask
away.
each of you.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, 5 years is a long time away. Generally, in terms of bills, we're looking 18 months window. I do hope that we do see each US state permitting and regulating online sports and iGaming. I don't think it's going to look like we see it today. I think the movement to digital identity, the movement to digital wallets is going to be much further embraced than we can ever imagine today with the movement into fintech and online banking that we're seeing. I think that's going to have a huge impact on our industry, and also kind of bringing in the overall trust on, can you identify and know someone and have the right controls online. So I do think that by 2030, we'll see many, many states.
All right. Thank you. Michael?
I think by 2030, 5 years is an eternity, I know, in any society. I'll be bold enough to say, I think every state will be licensing some form of iGaming by then. Even the most politically conservative environments are going to have to recognize that gaming may not be sports betting. It may not be traditional casino online. It's going to be sports. It's going to be a societal problem because entertainment, internet-based entertainment is going to be how people spend part of their leisure time and protect the consumer, both an industry set of standards, as Anna was talking about. I think everybody can sign up for. There is going to be a responsibility of governments, no matter how you look to betting or gambling, to place some guardrails for their citizens. And but I think 5 years from now, every state's going to have some level of iGaming regulation. I think that's kind of
Well,
weird to say that, but I really think it's going to happen.
sounds like we're going to be busy. Matt, what do you think?
Well, I would absolutely concur with everything that's being said now, although 5 years, which may seem like a lot of time, when it comes to actually implementing iGaming as it was with sports betting, is particularly challenging. And of course, it is in every state. Every state has its own nuances, whether it relates to tribal gaming, commercial gaming. But I would concur that iGaming will expand. It will expand rapidly. I think the results are in. It's very clear that it does expand the gaming industry, the gaming market to an entirely new demographic, a new generation. The need is there because the markets are already saturated with the illegal gaming, and I think it's really critical that states look seriously at that. We know states are also experiencing significant budget shortfalls. I know in Arizona, certainly, it's in many ways in the conversations, it's the elephant in the room. The challenges, as I said, relate to many different nuances, including, state revenue shares, taxes. Of course, we've covered things like geofencing and platforming. In Arizona, as in many states, you also have the tribal gaming issue where you have to geofence, for example, outside the boundaries. You have a lot of nuances dealing with inside and outside the boundaries as it relates to IGRA and NIGC. So all that said, generally speaking, I would concur. I would see that it would expand exponentially. I couldn't tell you what states I'd predict would get there first, but I would say those states that currently do have sports betting, online sports betting, will likely move in that direction pretty rapidly.
Well, on yesterday's webinar, we heard a representative from Massachusetts who is introducing iGaming in Massachusetts. So we hope that'll happen. We know that the House bill passed in Maryland, so we hope to see that get over on the Senate side. So there is some optimism there. We know that Indiana is also looking, and Missouri is looking to adopt sports betting. We have some southern states on the front. So all looks good. I'll give everyone listening another minute or two to type in any questions, and then we will end. I'm glad we got through all these major points and really want to thank you. Anyone who missed portions of this or wants to share this webinar with any friends or colleagues, it will be available on IDEA's website, ideagrowth.org. Thank you everyone for joining us. There's one question here, Anna. We got two questions. Let's see what we can get through in 2 minutes. Question, Anna. Recently, your company announced an initiative with a sports betting operator to make self-exclusion more effective. Would that also work for iGaming operators?
Yeah, we are always pushing for innovation with our customers in terms of responsible gaming. And so any initiative that we look to develop is both for any market that our customers would be in, as long as we have enough identifiers in the data that we're sharing with our customers to make those work.
And last question, there's been some news about a federal bill that was introduced. And one way that the federal legislators thought that they can handle responsible gaming is by limiting the number of deposits that a player can deposit per day. Do you have any thoughts on that type of approach to so-called responsible gaming? Basically limits on deposits no more than 5 bets a day. That's the federal government's idea of responsible gaming.
I think from a lot of the conversations that I've had, working with the medical professionals is the best way to look at how to implement any type of standard. I think one of the issues that exists, or the one that we've been talking about, all the regulated guys can implement any requirement that they want. But if you Google, how do I, gamble, and there are more offshore operators out there that are willing to take your money, the reality is it doesn't really matter what we do in a regulated market, because you're always going to be at the lowest common denominator. So if these are vanity projects, we need to make sure we're really thinking about the consumer and making sure we have the data points possible to empower adults to make the right decision when they are engaging with any entertainment company.
Excellent perspective and viewpoint. And thank you for all the thoughtfulness, and thank you for all the time. And thank you, GeoComply, for sponsoring again this year our 3 lunch webinars. And we hope we can work with you again next year. Thank you to Aubrey and everyone at GeoComply for coordinating. And have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thanks, Jeff.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.